Oh, welcome to the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. Figure that out because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. Good afternoon. Happy week this week as we are in the happy holiday season. Hanukkah is over. Christmas is on the horizon. The winter solstice has passed. Kwanzaa starts on the 26th. Multicultural Russ. I know, Bucky. I know. You didn't think I knew, did you? You didn't think I knew, but I do know. Welcome on in. A lot to get to today. The Eagles got the job done against the Commanders. It wasn't pretty at all times, but Eagles got the job done on Saturday. We'll talk about that. Commanders, the win over the Commanders. We will also kind of preview a little bit what the Eagles have coming up against the Bills and what will probably be the game that maybe either gives you the confidence that this team can go on a deep playoff run or maybe gets all of the dissenters and all the negative people out of the woodwork. We'll see how that goes. Also, Dan Quinn crying like a little bitch in the postgame. We'll get to that in today's show. If you're a Tyrese Maxey, a VJ Edgecombe, or a fan of both, massive recent stretch of games for arguably the best backcourt in the National Basketball Association, at least in the Eastern Conference. We will talk about those guys. And, of course, we have to talk about your team, your town, your Philadelphia Flyers, who find themselves in a very interesting spot. They're in town tonight against the Canucks, a team that did not trade Quinn Hughes to them, a team that used to have Rick Tocchet as their head coach. Tocchet, of course, decided to leave Vancouver in the offseason and come to Philadelphia. So you have a battle of two teams that have both been coached by Rick Tocchet. And Tocchet's also making some headlines. And it was interesting over the weekend to see a clip go around of what looked like an argument between Michkov and Tocchet on the bench. And Tocchet today addressed the media, and he seems to be kind of throwing some cold water on the media and seems to think that the media is maybe trying to stir up some kind of a narrative around Matvei Michkov and perhaps his relationship with the Philadelphia Flyers. We will get to all of that and a lot more on today's show. But first, Pearl Jam on the Ringer. No, just kidding. Let's go out to the comments here real quick. I'll pop the comments up in the bottom right. You can comment over on YouTube or Facebook or X. Remember, if you're on X/Twitter, you got to click the video first, go into old Periscope mode. And if you comment there, it'll pop up on the screen. Okay. We've got, let's see. I think I saw some stuff before we went live. Chris Reed with a great question. So did the Flyers blow the game on Saturday in solidarity with Tim Saunders? Great question. I don't know. Also says 2 gambling scandals involving Temple's men in basketball and now one at Westchester. Oh, Rammy, do we support gambling scandals at our alma mater? No, we don't. We don't. So, yeah, not great. I haven't done a whole lot of reading up on it. Andrew Fawcett's here from Texas says, greetings. Lovely time. Let's see. Amadeo giving it away today that I'm either going to pick up pizzelles from his house or sneak into the Xfinity Mobile Arena. I forgot to text him back. Now I remember. Okay. Let's see. Chris Freed says there are teams with winning records in the NFL this season. However, there are no good teams playing. Fight me. Very interesting. We'll get to that in a little bit. Nick Abe says, I think whoever has the best defense wins the Super Bowl this year. We always say that defense wins championships, but this year does feel very, very much like a team with a high-powered offense is going to likely come up short in their pursuit of the ultimate goal. Feels like a dominant defense this year has been the ultimate X factor. I mean, there are a lot of bad defenses in the NFL this year, but it does seem like when you run into a buzzsaw defense, and I would still consider this Eagles defense to be a buzzsaw kind of defense. They are a suffocating defense. I think that when you see some of the better offenses go up against this team, it's not going to look good for the opposition. Now, I say this as we go into a week where the Eagles are going to take on the Bills, and it's a Bills team that, really does need a win and needs to get their confidence, and we'll see. Let's see. Nick Abe kind of previewing a little bit of some stuff. Tocchet talks about Michkov like he did about Elias Pettersson. We'll get there in a little bit. Joe Papel calls me Mad Dog. I don't know if that's fair. Ford says VJ lockdown flag at one point, scored on the other end, did it with offense and defense. Correct. All right. Let's see. Patrick checks in, says Tocchet created this narrative by his actions, but we're going to get there in a second. Fawcett doesn't think that Barkey is ready yet. Had a great game, has some Gaudreau vibes, but isn't ready yet. We'll get to that in a little bit as well. What's this? Michael Sirkin says, with the Eagles winning the division, do you rest the starters or do you play them and risk injury? You definitely play them this week. Because this week coming up against Buffalo is like really a measuring stick game. And you want to make sure that your guys have one last real test before they hit the postseason. Now, I mean, I guess we can kind of flip this around now, right? So the thing that I found alarming coming out of the Commanders game wasn't that it wasn't a blowout win. It wasn't that at all. It was Dan Quinn, because Dan Quinn kind of threw out some really I thought very whiny comments in the post-game press conference, complaining about the fact that the Eagles went for a 2-point conversion. And also noting that the teams are going to play against each other in a couple of weeks. And I actually want you to hear from the Commanders coach. And again, this is after the Eagles win. This is after Jake Elliott missed 2 field goals, but realistically, he missed 3, right? One of them didn't count because of a penalty he missed. He hooked it to the left. And then there was a penalty, and then eventually he tries again, and he misses again. I would consider that 3 missed field goals. You want to call it 2, that's fine. But Jake Elliott just did not have it on Saturday, and you can make an argument that Jake Elliott hasn't had the same it factor that he's had the past few seasons. I know last year was viewed in a lot of ways as a down year, and I kind of thought he had an injury last year, but it does feel like he's fallen off a bit. Dan Quinn just can't wrap his mind around why the Eagles would have gone for 2 late in that game against the Commanders. So let's go out to Commanders coach Dan Quinn, and I want you to shake in your boots when you hear what he had to say about the Eagles' decision to go for 2 and about what's coming in 2 weeks.
Point conversion and then the fight that kind of went after that.
Yeah. I thought this would be a tough game that would go all the way through. We talked last year's game. We thought the biggest difference was, the turnover margin. And if we could play, better in that space, we'd give ourselves a real shot to go. So, hey, that's their choice, man. I want to look at the tape and see what happened before, our ejections or poise or any of those things. Like, our guys are absolutely going to stick up for themselves and for their teammates.
By the way, the fight where we saw Steen get gang jumped by 5 dudes, and he automatically earned my respect because I've been kind of critical about Steen's play. Steen goes to bat for his teammate, takes on 5 dudes. Good on him. Yeah, it's fine. If you want to say that you're proud of your team for standing up for one another, if Dan Quinn's proud of the Commanders for standing up for one another, cool. Live your best life, homie. But let's keep going.
So I'll have a better sense.
Obviously, it's their choice to go for 2 there,
right
and it's your job to stop them. But is there an unspoken respect between coaches, teams, where in a game in that situation you don't do that? And kind of, did you feel like it was a little bit of a sign of disrespect?
Yeah, I can only answer from my side what I would do. But hey, man, that's how they want to get down. Then all good. We play them again in 2 weeks.
I can only speak to what I would do. Well, Dan Quinn, you'd have to get up double digits, and you would have to be heading back to the postseason maybe to kind of be on the same playing field. We don't need to talk about what happened last year in the NFC Championship game when your team got boat raced, steamrolled, lambasted, decimated, had their memory desecrated. It was bad. It was bad, Dan Quinn. So the idea that now Dan Quinn's going to take umbrage with the fact that the Eagles opted to go for 2 late in the game when their kicker was clearly not on his game in any way, shape, or form. That reporter's right. It's their decision to go for 2, and it's your job to stop them. Well, the Commanders did not stop the Eagles most of the day. And certainly when Saquon Barkley started running angry, that fight that the Commanders maybe wanted to put up died. Now, in fairness, this is not a healthy Commanders team. This is not a Commanders team that had health luck, we'll call it, this year, or good health fortune this season, right? Jaden Daniels missed a lot of time, and he's been shut down for the rest of the year. Terry McLaurin had injury issues. They've had injury concerns this season, and it's certainly a big disappointment to go from getting blown out, getting absolutely housed in the NFC Championship game last year, to missing the playoffs entirely this year. But like, that's the reality. And Dan Quinn and the Commanders, you can tell it's probably taken an effect. Like, it's probably taken its toll on them this season. And again, like, when you come into the season with expectations that Jaden Daniels is going to take his game to the next level, and like, yeah, there was a really weird contract dispute between McLaurin and the Commanders. They got that contract done. They came into the season with really high expectations, thinking, all right, like, the Eagles are the reigning Super Bowl champions. The Cowboys are always good. The Giants are a joke. The Commanders probably thought at worst were a wild card team, but have the potential, the possibility of actually competing for the NFC East title. And it hasn't happened. This notion, though, that like, well, we play them again in 2 weeks. The fuck are you going to do? I mean, like, Dan Quinn, all due respect. I mean, no disrespect. The fuck are you going to do? What are you going to do in 2 weeks? You going to like send the goon out? You know, like John Chaney this and like, send out the goon? Is that what's going to happen? Are you going to get like Nick Delorier to put on a Commanders jersey and go punch somebody out on the sideline? You going to go get Tom Wilson to take off his Capitals jersey, go put on a Commanders jersey and like go punch Nick Sirianni in the head? Like, what are you going to do? What does that mean? We play them again in 2 weeks. So, and by the way, if you're not going to send out the goon, and if we're not to take that as an implication that you're going to have your team play, really fierce and maybe even a little bit dirty right on the edge, are you saying that like what, your starters are going to beat the Eagles like backups or third stringers in the final week of the season? Like, whoop do you fucking do? Well, what else? What are you going to do? Did I miss something here? We play them in 2 weeks. Yeah. You know what's going to happen in 2 weeks? The Eagles aren't going to play their starters, right? Because it's not going to matter. And your team is going to play whoever the hell they want. And if your team does even the slightest thing that's viewed as dirty, there's going to be ejections because now the refs in week 18 are going to be cognizant of the fact that you've gone out to the media and said, well, we play them again in 2 weeks. So again, the hell are you doing? What's the goal? What's the end goal if you're Dan Quinn? Feels like he's just trying to, I don't know. Is Dan Quinn just trying to stand up for his guys? Maybe. But his team didn't get the job done. I don't think there's anybody right now. If you're an Eagles fan, right? You don't walk away from Saturday's win and feel like, wow, this team is the ultimate powerhouse. We are absolutely going to roll all the way to the Super Bowl again. Like, there are still concerns, and ultimately it still is a 29-18 game. It's an 11-point win, and I was kind of thinking this should be probably closer to like a 20-point win. It was 11. Okay, fine. You move on. Dan Quinn will have to move on, and in 2 weeks, we'll see if his starters can beat the Eagles' third stringers. We will find out sooner than later. Now, I will note that in this game, there were a few positive things to happen. And I'm looking to see really quick. I see people are going at it in the comments. I feel like Ford and Nick Abe right now are like the Commanders and the Eagles late in the game, just going at it. I kind of find it somewhat intriguing. What I should do is I should get Amadeo to be a moderator of the comments. That could be a lot of fun. Maybe not. That might be a bad idea. By the way, this is funny. Chris Reed says Cooper, the cougar hunter, DeJean, came to play on Saturday. That man is on the prowl, on and off the gridiron. NWO for life, brother. Real quick, and I don't have this queued up, so I'd have to see if I could find it fast enough. Can I vamp long enough to find the Cooper DeJean play? But Cooper DeJean did the 5-knuckle shuffle in the end zone. And I laughed because if you're a pro wrestling fan, you know that famously Nikki Bella and John Cena were in a relationship. And so the idea that like Cooper DeJean, who may or may not be dating Nikki Bella, would go out and almost like pay homage to her ex is pretty intriguing. All right, so here, let's fly out here real quick. So this is Cooper DeJean doing the 5-knuckle shuffle in honor of John Cena, apparently. Nikki Bella's ex. I don't know. Does this make it more or less likely that they're dating? All right, here you go. Here's Cooper DeJean. And he goes. He's in the end zone. Pin 1, 2. Now, that looked like a kick out. They're celebrating the pinfall victory. It does look like there might have been a kick out, but okay. So you got that. There was something that came out of this game that made me feel a little bit better. Like, we've been seeing every week now it feels like there is a push from the Eagles to fix this narrative around the team, to fix this idea that there's a broken locker room, a fractured locker room, whatever. The fun thing is we've gotten to see behind the scenes what's going on with Hard Knocks. And so you kind of get that. It depends on your thought process, right? Because a while ago, John Kincaid, I think it was, said in the morning on 97.5 that like these guys know they're mic'd up, like they're trying to turn this narrative against the fans, blah, blah, blah. I look at it and I say something really, really simple. I think that you're seeing this Eagles team now getting over being worried, right? I see this Eagles team getting over that hesitancy and that fear that like, wow, we are a good team, but like maybe this isn't the year. Like maybe we're just kind of cursed. They've gotten past it now. They've gotten over it. And so there was a thing that happened on the sidelines that actually kind of made me happy because, there was this weird narrative out there this year that, Jalen Hurts doesn't talk to his offense, that he as a leader is too quiet on the sideline. And so there's a video that was going around on TikTok of Jalen Hurts on the sideline talking to his guys. And we saw this not that long ago. I feel like we saw it a few weeks ago where there was a moment with Jalen Hurts and his wideouts, right? We saw it on Hard Knocks where he goes up to Devontae Smith, comes over to talk to him, and they acknowledge that like they had a miscommunication on a play, right? Where I think Devontae ran a slant, but I think Hurts thought he was going to run straight into the end zone. And he said that he signaled something and it was a miscommunication. Well, here you go. You got Jalen Hurts over on the sideline. This is before Saquon Barkley goes off to pick up that 12-yard touchdown. So, like, there you go. Hurts is there with his lineman telling him what he sees. And, like, again, I get it. It's just part of sports. It's part of football. Like, you want to see your team communicate. But I think that there's just this very weird subset of fans and some radio people who really want to push a narrative, or wanted earlier in the year to push a narrative that like this team was lost, this team was confused, this team was disjointed. And I think that what you've now gotten to see over the last few weeks, especially, is a team that seems to be kind of finding its groove. We'll see if that continues against Buffalo. Like if the Eagles go out and hold Buffalo to like 24 points or fewer, right? If the Eagles walk away with a 24-21 win over the Bills next week, we probably feel really good about it, right? Because that Josh Allen has the ability to put up a crooked number. We know that Buffalo's offense can do that. And so we need to see, like, is this going to be the year of the defense? To this point, the Eagles defense has done a great enough job. I'm not even say good enough, has done a great job of kind of covering up some of the issues with this team because they've been able, for the most part, to hold the opposition to very few points. We'll see if it happens against Josh Allen. Now, there's somebody that we heard from post-game that I think is probably worth hearing from, because if the Eagles are going to reach that next level, and if the Eagles are going to go back to another Super Bowl, and if they are going to compete for a Super Bowl, then in order for them to get there, a guy who's going to be absolutely critical to that effort is Saquon Barkley. And so Saquon had some big runs in this game. He had some powerful runs. That 12-ish yard touchdown that he had, he made contact with 6 different commanders. 6. He broke tackles. He was like kind of in the midst of a spin. He broke the tackle with 2 guys hanging off him, a third one. Then there was a 4th one. And then as he got to the goal line, 5 and 6 came in. So Saquon Barkley very clearly had the right mentality on Saturday. I just want you to hear from Saquon real quick about where he found that gumption and what gave him the feeling of kind of being back.
O-line did a great job. I tried to make a move, didn't really fall for it, and low my shoulder and kind of just ran angry and finished.
Jordan called it an angry run.
So he just said that he had to run angry and finish. Okay, so then you take that and you say, all right, Saquon feels like he's kind of getting back to being that dominant player, that game breaker, right? And I think a lot of that is going to come down to this offensive line. And it sounds like Lane Johnson is going to be back for the Bills game, which is going to be a huge boost. I mean, listen, I think Fred Johnson has filled in admirably for Lane Johnson to this point. This line has trouble run blocking, but it felt like this past game was better. It felt like over the last few weeks, the run blocking has been a bit better. Saquon has started to look more like the guy he was last year than, the one that people were worried had maybe taken a step or two back from a season ago. Over the last 3 games, Saquon Barkley is averaging over or about 110 yards per game. He has 332 yards over the past 3 games, One more, and he would have had 111 yards per game. He's at 3 touchdowns over the last 3 weeks, and he's averaging 5.3 yards per carry. So if you're looking for a positive to take from the last couple of games, the last 3 games, at least when it comes to the ground game, that should be enough. Like, that is a very positive sign if you are an Eagles fan. Now, if you are a Jalen Hurts fan, well, obviously you feel good about the no turnovers on Saturday. You feel good about the 2 touchdowns. I also saw something today. Do I say Jalen Hurts is in the top 10 of passing touchdowns in the National Football League? Yeah, but shovel passes count for that, Russ. Yeah, I don't know. Are we going to figure out like other ways to kind of put down or try to kind of poo-poo the effort that Jalen Hurts is putting out there? I don't know. But I'll tell you what, they're looking really good, and they're starting to hit that stride. And A.J. Brown is getting involved in the game, and it seems like maybe there's been some patching up of the relationship between A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts. I mean, remember a few weeks ago when the Eagles were in the midst of that losing streak, we heard A.J. Brown say the name Jalen, which may seem stupid to harp on. But a few weeks ago, we heard A.J. Brown, I think for the first time this season in a game or in a post game, say, Jalen puts me in these positions. He trusts me. I have to make the play. It feels like since that time, they've kind of been more on the same page. There was an image going around of Saquon, Jalen Hurts, and A.J. Brown together after the game. You have to start to feel like maybe things are starting to get better with this team. So there you go. I don't know what this is in relation to. Fawcett says, Russ's sphere of influence. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. I don't know what it's in relation to. There are so many comments coming through. I can't do it. I don't know. All right. Here we go. That's the Eagles. Now, as much as I love the Eagles, I have to tell you, I'm loving a lot of what I'm seeing from the Sixers as well. And we're going to finish the show with the Flyers because, of course, as we know, we're going to go from here to the Xfinity Mobile Arena. It's a national game. It's a 7:30 start. So the Press Row show starts at 7 o'clock tonight instead of 7:30. And then tomorrow, we're Chickies and Pete's in Bordentown for Snow the Goalie Radio. Special day. It's on a Tuesday instead of a Wednesday because Wednesday's Christmas Eve. And I'm a good Catholic and I refuse to do a radio show on Christmas Eve. So Tuesday in Bordentown at 6 o'clock, Chickies and Pete's. It's going to be great. But I want to dive into the Sixers here for a little bit before we get to the Flyers. Okay. I remember saying early in the season that I was not worried and I wasn't writing off the initial games of VJ Edgecombe where he looked like an absolute superstar out of nowhere, right? Like where he looked like an immediate day one impact player. But I will say that VJ Edgecombe has gone through some of the ups and downs of a rookie season, but the last 4 games or so, he has somehow taken his game to what feels like another level. And at the same time, Tyrese Maxey is absolutely balling out. Like, I just, let me hit you with some numbers here really quick on VJ Edgecombe, who continues to just look incredible game after game after game. So a couple nights ago, Edgecombe had 26 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, won 10 of 21 from the field. A lot of field goal attempts, shot under 50%, but you take it. He did that in 35 minutes of action. Over his last 4 games, he's been phenomenal for this team. 24.3 points per game, 4.8 rebounds per game, 3.8 assists per game, shooting 50% from the field, 40.6% from beyond the arc, 82.4% from the free throw line, and he's averaging just under 38 minutes per game. Now, we all kind of knew that there was a chance that there was going to have to be some finagling of minutes this season, right? Because we knew that you would have Maxey was going to have the lion's share of minutes. You had to get Quentin Grimes in games. You also obviously had to get Jared McCain minutes when he came back. And then you didn't know what to expect of VJ Edgecombe. Well, after he burst on the scene in the first game of the season, and again, he's had some of these ups and downs, Nick Nurse is leaning on him. And you have to give Nick Nurse a lot of credit. It would be easy to hit the panic button when a rookie starts to struggle or seems to maybe get tired. I think that there was a stretch in the season where Edgecombe looked like maybe the travel was catching up to him. Maybe it was just the nonstop lifestyle of being an NBA player was catching up to him and he kind of got a breather and then he came back in and it feels like he's been better ever since. But for you to get almost 38 minutes per game over the last 4 to put up 24 points and to shoot 50% from the field, the big thing is the 40%, 40.6% from from beyond the arc. Edgecombe, when he got drafted, one of the biggest question marks was his ability to shoot from beyond the arc. And he has improved that element of his game in a massive way. And so when you start to look at what can this Sixers season be, and we continue to talk about it, it feels like week in and week out, we're kind of going back and forth, right? Because there are certainly times where you can look at it and say, if everything breaks right for the Sixers, which means nothing actually breaks in their bodies, could the Sixers be like a top 4 team in the East? I still think that there's like a non-zero chance of it happening. Even if they end up being like a 6th seed, I think they can give anybody a run. It comes down to whether or not Joel Embiid is going to be even like, what have I been saying the whole year? Like 70% Joel Embiid would be really helpful. 50% Joel Embiid, not so much, especially if he's going to try to jack up, 18, 20 shots a game. Paul George is like this ultimate X factor as well. And Jared McCain hasn't really found his game yet. If he does, man, all of a sudden you're rolling 4 guards that all have the ability to put up 20 plus points per night. They're not all going to do it in the same game, but you have 4 guards that could go 20 plus. Obviously, Maxey can go 30 plus every night. I think we're now seeing with the outside threat that like Edgecombe could probably be a very confident 20 point per game scorer as a rookie. He will have peaks where he's hitting, 25, 26, 27 points over a 5 or 6 game stretch. And then he'll have a few games where he probably puts up like 12 or 15. And maybe those just happen to coincide with games where Paul George is on and Paul George is getting more shots. And I don't know, maybe you get like a few Paul George vintage games where he's 26 points and 10 rebounds and 7 assists or something, a block and a steal or something. Like those are still valuable games to have. The nice thing is that the Sixers team has the ability to kind of morph, and it has the ability to kind of adjust based on the opposition. They don't have to be so rigid in their rotation. They don't have to be so rigid in where they're getting their shots every night. They don't have to be rigid in how many shots each guy gets per night. They kind of just go with the flow. And so far, the flow has really been Tyrese Maxey is the captain of the ship. He gets the job done. Whenever Joel Embiid is in, he gets a lot of shots. Sometimes he has a good night. Sometimes he doesn't. Paul George, I think, has looked significantly better over the past month. You got Edgecombe looking good. Quentin Grimes has looked really solid. Barlow's been a good player this year. They've had guys that have impressed. And then it's always funny to me when you see like Andre Drummond go like 3 of 4 from downtown in a game. So there are a lot of positives that you can look at with the Sixers right now. Now that's just Edgecombe over the last 4 games. However, there was something else I wanted to get to because there was another thing that I saw that was like interesting. So you go like game over game, right? Here's just point total wise. This is how Edgecombe has gone over the last 5 games. 15 to 22 to 26 against Atlanta in a loss, 23 points in a win over the Knicks, and then 26 points against Dallas. You then look at rebounds. They've stayed pretty consistent. 5, 4, 6, 3, 6, and then assists hovering in the same general area, 3, 5, 2, 4, 4. Overall, you got to feel really, really good about VJ Edgecombe. You have to. He has been fantastic. Good for him. And it's wild to think that like while he's having this awesome rookie season, Tyrese Maxey has been an absolute bona fide superstar player. I don't know if I've ever been as happy for a single player in this league than I am for Tyrese Maxey. Because as I always say, you can choose to do a lot of different things with your fame. You can choose to do a lot of different things with your platform. Tyrese Maxey just seems to be the most positive human being playing in Philadelphia right now. And maybe the most positive guy to play in Philadelphia in a very long time. But like this season, with him shouldering the load, he's playing nearly 40 minutes per game. He's averaging on the season 31.7 points per game. He's shooting just under 40% from beyond the arc while attempting 9.5 3-pointers per game. So you might look at it and say, we'd like to see him be a 40+% 3-point shooter. That's true. When you're attempting 9.5 3-pointers per game, I'll take a shade under 40%. That's fine. But he's still getting his teammates involved. I mean, he's still at 7.1 assists per game. He's at 4.5 rebounds per game. And he's still causing calamity on the defensive side, right? He's creating nearly it's just over 1.5 steals per game. He's just under a block per game. Maxey's playing a great 2-way game. It allows guys like Edgecombe to not have to feel like they have to shoulder an unfair amount of the load. It's a pretty positive time to be a Sixers fan. Pretty positive time to be a Sixers fan. I'm just saying. I know that people like to poo-poo on the Sixers. I know that there are people who are very worried about the Sixers, and they're worried about letting themselves get hurt again by the Sixers. I just think that the ultimate thing is what we all kind of knew it was going to be, right? Will Joel Embiid be healthy at any point this season? And will he be healthy for an extended period that it doesn't throw your entire game? Like, that's the question. Because if he can somehow come back at 70% going into the playoffs, and you have an idea of how to still run this team through Maxey, and Embiid can be like the second or third scoring option on the team, this team has a legitimate shot to do something of value in the playoffs. But we will see. All right, now, I want to go from there, and we have to go to the Flyers because there's a lot going on with the Flyers. I feel, hold on. I actually did mean to go to one other thing because there was a great soundbite that came out over the weekend. It was a great soundbite that came out on Sunday. I think it was Sunday. Maybe it was Saturday. VJ Edgecombe. We played a clip when he got drafted, and it was hard not to fall in love with the guy as a player and as a human being playing in this city. But Edgecombe was asked about like what he thought the ceiling was for him and Tyrese Maxey. And so we'll give the shout to PHLY Sixers for putting this out. But just want you to check this out because this is the thing that should warm the cockles of your heart.
Always when you look at the duo of you and Tyrese specifically, just knowing what you guys can do and the chemistry continue to grow, I guess what do you think you two just can be like as a duo?
One of the greatest ever. I feel like we can.
What can you and Tyrese Maxey be? He says one of the greatest ever. Like backcourts? Woo.
We can do a lot of big things this league. We just got to keep our head down, keep working. Trust what God has planned for us, and just keep working. I think overall, years to come, I think we stay together and we all just keep getting better and better each day. We're gonna be good. And I can't leave Mac out for sure.
I mean, it's kind of hard to not like the Sixers team, and it's legitimately kind of hard to not look at these guys and want the ultimate best for them. We'll see where we land. Now, let's get to the Flyers. We have to get to the Flyers. A lot of stuff going on. And it sucks that it's kind of come to this, but I think we all kind of knew that there was going to be a collision course between Rick Tocchet, Matvei Michkov, and then maybe even the Flyers media. And it finally happened. We've been kind of waiting for it this entire season. And we are here. We have reached the moment because there was, as I mentioned earlier in the show, there was a clip going around of Michkov and Tocchet on the bench, and it looked like a pretty heated back and forth between the two. And then people started freaking out because this is just what happens. And there's been this thought that, Tocchet hasn't been using Michkov the right way. And so I want to throw to this really quickly because I'll go to we'll have to kind of scrub this because if we don't, the overlords, the tech overlords get really upset if you use footage. So we'll be careful here. We'll do this respectfully. So there was an interaction on the bench in the second period against the Rangers over the weekend. And so Michkov is explaining to the coaches like what he saw, what he was doing. Tocchet comes over and is kind of like, yo, dude, calm down, chill out. Everything's fine. And then Michkov is, you tell him, Michkov's like pretty pissed off. He's trying to figure out like whatever the argument is, and we'll get to it in a second because Tocchet gave some clarity on it today. And you can see Tocchet's like trying to calm him down, and they're going back and forth, and they're aligned, and Michkov kind of gives him the head nod, and Tocchet kind of, I like the double fist, right? Doing the double fist there, like we're in this together. And then, it looks like they kind of ended on a pretty positive note. Now, I think that there's a big part, and you can see Michkov kind of brings Tocchet back in, and they continue the conversation. There's still the language barrier. Now, I think that at the end of the clip, it looks like things had kind of gotten smoothed over. But that, of course, gave people a ton of stuff to run with this weekend about, look, Michkov hates the coach hates Michkov. And I gotta be honest with you, I'm at the point now where we are less than halfway through the season. And I'm like there's a small part of me that is like ready to like be done with the season because there are so many people that are just so wildly off base with where they're at on this team, with this player, with this coach. And it feels like nobody is threading the needle the right way. Like, let's at least really quickly kind of zoom in and hone in on like what this team is, what we thought it was going to be, if it's meeting expectations, if it's not, what Michkov is, what Tocchet is. Okay. The Flyers coming into the season, no one had real hopes for. The front office did patchwork sort of moves in year 3 of a rebuild. They did not go out and make a trade that was meant to make them a contender. They also did not go out and make a trade that was going to blow up the nucleus of the team. They didn't trade a player like Travis Konechny that's expected to be a point producer and trade him for future picks and future assets and a prospect. They didn't do that. They went out and got Christian Dvorak. They made a trade for Zegras, which has turned out to be a lot more impactful than I think even they had hoped in its best way it would be. They've gone out and between the combination of Dvorak and Zegras is now like a point per game player. Dvorak can give you a guy who can play center, which they desperately need. He can play wing. He and Zegras have kind of done this like hybrid thing together where they're almost like a buddy cop film on any line they play on. And that's a good thing. Dan Vladar was brought in to kind of be the backup and maybe provide some competition for Sam Ersson. Instead, he's taken over the gig as being the number one guy on this team. And, you know, you just have to hope that he doesn't come back down to earth, because if he does, and if he comes back to like his career norms, well, then this team is going to lose a bunch of games. And they haven't exactly had the greatest stretch over the last 10 games. Like a lot of people, I think, have kind of lost sight of this. They're 3-3-4 in their last 10 games, which isn't piss poor, but it's also not very good. That's within the Metropolitan Division, that is tied for the second fewest wins over the course of the last 10 games. So that's not ideal. Now, you could look at the points percentage. You can play that game if you want. And yes, theoretically, the Flyers have been better there. Fine. You can also look at the Metropolitan Division as a whole and say, hey, the Flyers have only allowed 99 goals, which is the second fewest in the entire division. I will point out that the team that allows the fewest is the Caps. They've only allowed 96, and they've already played 2 more games than the Flyers. We're not going to get lost in the minutia here. But what we will have to talk about is what exactly were the expectations for the Flyers going into the season? And I think it's pretty fair to say no one expected them to be a legit playoff team, because by the acquisition of Dvorak, the signing of Vladar, and even the trade for Zegras, it didn't feel like they were pushing all their chips in. It kind of felt like they were saying, all right, we want to see if this new coach comes in and if he's able to elevate some of these guys that we want to see take that next step. And so in my mind, I had a few guys that they definitely wanted to see. Can Tocchet get more out of these guys? And they wanted to get like some clarity on, do we build around these guys? Do we include these guys? Or do we trade them because they aren't going to be part of this thing long-term? So just allow me for a moment. You can go back and forth in the comments, and I'll pull some up here as we go. To me, they very clearly wanted to know, is Cam York a good player or not? Because obviously there was a falling out last season with John Tortorella. Is Cam York a better player than he was at the end of last season under John Tortorella? Is he more like the guy who played for this team after Tortorella got fired? To this point, despite the fact that I've been critical of Cam York and not the biggest Cam York believer, he's had a good season. So check. Tyson Foerster. Could Tyson Foerster be a guy who could legitimately be a 30-plus goal scorer? He was on pace to be a 40-goal scorer before he essentially got shut down for the season with an arm surgery. So I would say, even though there's an injury and it's hard to kind of take that the data that were compiled and extrapolate that over the course of an entire season, I would still say on the whole, probably check. So that's 2. Jamie Drysdale. Could they turn Jamie Drysdale into maybe not being a power play dynamo, maybe not being the dynamic offensive defenseman we thought we were going to get, but maybe become more of a well-rounded defenseman who can be, at worst, a second pair defenseman? Did they get that? Check. They did. So that's 3. Drysdale, York, Foerster. Could Rick Tocchet get more out of Owen Tippett? Well, the answer to that question varies by the person, because as you all know, I am not bullish on Owen Tippett. I find him to be an incredibly frustrating and streaky player. So I would say, has Tocchet gotten more out of Tippett? No. All right, so you're 3 for 4 so far. And then I think you probably took a look at Matvei Michkov. He probably would have been player number 1, but like he's the easy one to look at. So we're going to put him off to the side for a second. Was Tocchet going to get more out of Travis Konechny? I would say that he has not to this point, and I think there are just wider concerns about, is this the player Travis Konechny is always going to be or not? Because you need him to be a goal-scoring threat. Him getting assists and secondary assists is lovely. Him getting empty net goals is fine if you want to just look at counting stats and not take into, into account the context of when the goals were scored. You could. He needs to be more of a goal-scoring threat, in my very humble opinion, especially with Forster out. He's looked better of late. He hasn't looked exceptional this season. So I'd say, sorry, you're 3 for 5. Sean Couturier. Would Sean Couturier look more like the guy who had 2 back surgeries and that Torts ran into the ground 2 years ago to start the season? And even though he played well, he kind of hit a wall and never recovered and then ended up getting benched. And it was a whole big nasty thing 2 years ago. I think Couturier's had ups and downs. There are certainly people who want to go out of their way to shit on every time Couturier makes a bad play. They also don't acknowledge when he makes a good one. I'm also not a lapdog for the Flyers, and so I can also acknowledge that Couturier has also had some games and some moments that haven't exactly aged well or looked particularly good. And if you want to criticize Matvei Michkov for looking slow, Sean Couturier looks like he's, often skating in quicksand. I will give the guy grace, though. He had 2 back surgeries, and I don't know what you expect. Okay, so even at worst, those are 6 dudes, right? You go 3 of 6, you're batting 500. You say, all right, not ideal, but fine. Then you can even look at like secondary, tertiary players. Would a guy like Emil Andre get an opportunity and flourish? He has. He initially got sent down. He came back up. He flourished. Cool. You can look at a guy like a Bobby Brink. What would Bobby Brink look like? Is Bobby Brink going to be better? Well, early in the season, when you had that Forster and Cates and Brink line really rolling, it felt like Brink was also set to kind of take that next step, and it felt like Cates was as well. Those guys have both kind of come back down to earth. Not ideal. So, all right, even there, maybe you're around 500, right? And when you're in year 3 of a rebuild, you can't exactly expect everybody to be a hit. You can't expect every player to take that next step. Some will and some won't. Okay, so even if you say you're around 500, then you go, okay, let's look at the actual legitimate star players or the guys that we need to be star players if this team is going to find a Stanley Cup contending window, right? Well, how many of them exist on this team? There aren't many, right? Even if you were incredibly bullish on Tyson Forster, you didn't look at him as a guy who's like a cornerstone to the franchise. You looked at him as a guy who would be a really useful player on a playoff team and could be a legitimately useful player on a Stanley Cup contending team. But you don't look at him and say, we build the team around Tyson Forster. There is not a single center on the team right now that you say, yeah, you build around that guy. Okay, that's another problem entirely. We'll put that off to the side. So you look at guys like Denver Barkey. If Denver Barkey gets an opportunity, will he look good? Well, he looked really good against the Rangers and had 2 assists. In his first game, he had an opportunity on his second shift to score the first goal of his NHL career. He looked good. Is he ready for the big show? I have no idea. We'll find out. I know that the Flyers maybe would have rather go to Alex Bump in that spot, but Bump got hurt. He's out like a week or so. So Barkey got the call up and he made the most of his opportunity. Awesome. You see guys like Carl Grundstrom come up and look like impact players, like look good. You saw a guy like Ty Murchison come up. No one knew what to expect from Ty Murchison. He looked like a good player. Okay. Are any of those guys ones that you say, foundational cornerstone of this team, that when we look back on this team 5-6 years from now as they are contending for a Stanley Cup, you say, yes, that was the moment that we knew that Ty Murchison was going to be a number 1 defenseman. No. But when you're able to get guys in and out of the lineup that are coming up from Lehigh Valley and they're playing the same system or they're kind of going under the same fundamentals between the minors and the big show, it probably helps. We talked about this last year. Like, oddly enough, LaPerriere and Tortorella, it sounds like, really never communicated this idea of like having the same system, the same tactics. So when a guy would come up from Lehigh Valley, he'd be like, what the hell am I doing? Like, this isn't anything like I was just doing. And so you'd rarely see a guy come up and make an immediate impact because you're like overthinking everything and you're trying to learn a new system. Whereas this year, anybody who comes up from Lehigh Valley, you're just kind of slotting in. You're just playing with different dudes, but you're able to play more instinctual hockey. Okay. This is a big runaround just to get us back to Michkov. Okay. So the real question was, would Matvei Michkov take the next step? And the answer so far has been no. Here's where I'm at. I want to be fair, okay? I don't want to be incendiary, and I don't want to be an apologist. I am neither, right? I like to look at these things as fairly as I can. I'm now beyond the point of like hearing the excuse that like Matvei Michkov isn't in shape and he's got to get in shape in February. I call bullshit. I do. I don't know if there was an ankle injury in the offseason. Like, I'm actually starting to get kind of convinced there wasn't. I think the team tried to cover for Michkov. If he had an ankle injury, I don't think it was a very serious one. I think they were trying to cover for him early. And I think that for the first month and a half of the season, he looked incredibly slow. He looked out of shape, and it's bad, very bad. And at some point, he openly admitted that he messed up, that he needs to stay in Voorhees, that this past offseason was not what he needed to do for his body, for his career, and he learned a valuable lesson. And I, as a human being, can also look at that and say, all right, cool, don't do it again. Learn from it, get better. Cool. And at the same time, I can say, all right, I understand this notion that like hockey players are going to play themselves into a certain level of shape, and that if you started off behind the 8 ball, it's going to be really hard to catch up. But I will point out that there are times throughout the season, right, where a guy like doesn't play for months and is able to get back in the lineup. And I get that Rasmus Ristolainen is probably not a great physical comparison for Matvei Michkov. They don't play the same position. They have entirely different frames. They have entirely different skill sets. But Rasmus Ristolainen hops in the lineup after not being able to play hockey for 9 months, 10 months, and he looks like a normal, competent player. Now, again, I don't think Risto's particularly great, and I would trade him the second I had the opportunity if somebody gave anything of value. But like, I will not subscribe to this notion now that Michkov is still out of shape, still super slow, and can't catch up until the Olympic break. I just don't believe that. I think that if you want to get yourself in good enough shape, and you have the kind of resources that professional players have, whether that's nutritionists, that's trainers, whatever, there is a way for you to get yourself in better cardio shape. And if that is still not being reached, well, then that's on the player. But I think Michkov, for the most part, over the last like 3-4 weeks, while he has not looked explosive, I think he's looked better than he did early in the season. So I see what looks like pretty clear improvement conditioning wise. But Rick Tocchet's still not playing him that much. And so, you know, when you say, did he get better year over year? The answer so far has been no. And while some guys like a Tyson Forster have figured out a way to like reach that next level and then get hurt, but like reached another level, that has not been the case for Michkov to this point. And so fans are upset because he is legitimately their only star player that they have right now. Now, we can argue Porter Martone will be a star player and looks like a bona fide stud for Michigan State, but he's not here right now. And if you're insane, you could make the case that Jet Lachenko is going to be a star. I don't see it, but maybe you think that he will be. But he's also not here. Maybe you're like really high on Jack Nesbitt, and you're like, hey, he might not be a 1C, but I think he'd be a really good 2C. Well, he's not here either. So who exactly are you banking on? Oh, Alex Bump? I don't think you don't put cornerstone labels on Alex Bump or Oliver Bonk, or Carson Bjarnsson's having a nice season for Lehigh Valley, but you don't put that on him as the goalie. Even if you want to live in the Igor of Reagan world, right? Oh, look how good he's played in the KHL the last 2 years. They're not here. So all you can really do is evaluate the elite talent that is here. And as of right now, across the board, the only elite player, the only player that right now you can look at and say that guy has an elite skill set is Matvei Michkov. Not anybody. There's no one else. Even in his like heyday, Sean Couturier is a Selke winner. You would say like, that's not really an elite skill set. He's very good at a lot of different things, and he's a responsible 200-foot player. Travis Konechny does not have an elite skill set. Owen Tippett does not have an elite skill set. Bobby Brink and Noah Cates, they do not have elite skill sets. Nick Delorier does not have an elite skill set. Garnet Hathaway, Nikita Grabenkin, not elite skill players. Rodrigo Abels, not elite. Jamie Drysdale, not elite. Rasmus Ristolainen, not elite. Okay, we can go down. You get it. Michkov's the only guy that you can look at and say, this guy could be a game-changing player. But man, only if the body, the mind, the attitude all align. And you have to hope that that's where he's going to get. Okay. That is where I think I'm being fair. Today, we got a very weird moment at the podium from Rick Tocchet. Rick Tocchet noted something about the questions that were being asked during the media availability. And he said something that I actually did take a little bit of exception to. And so we're going to get there, and I want to get to some of the other stuff. But I want to go out to Tocchet because I believe trying to be fair to the coach and trying to be fair to the player. And so I want you to just kind of hear some of what was said at the media scrum at the press conference earlier today. And then we'll do a little analysis on how fair it is. All right, here's Tocchet earlier today.
Are they both in line tonight?
Yeah, they'll both be. It wasn't even an argument. It was about.
All right, here's Tocchet about the other night when he and Michkov were seen in that like back and forth on the bench.
There was a cameras caught in the Rangers game, a little interaction with Michkov and Yogi and you. I just was wondering what your perspective.
It happens all the time. This is not Mitch. It's just a story because it's Mitch. It wasn't even an argument. It was about when he should switch and not with Barkey. And he's getting it when to switch and when not in the power. But that was all. He was just getting frustrated on when to switch and when he shouldn't switch. I know a lot of media people like to let him do what he wants, but there's a time to switch and when to switch. And
Tocchet knows better than to say that on the media thing. He knows better. He's starting to fall into the coach and out of the media pundit. Okay. We'll get back to that in a sec.
That's really what it comes down to.
You've talked about, as he's sort of adjusting this season, he's kept the right attitude off of the ice behind closed doors with you. Have you seen that continue? But at the same time, he's obviously getting frustrated at times too, I would think, when he's not scoring.
Yeah, any high, guys that want to score goals, they get frustrated, but you can't let it affect your overall game. You got to continue to go to the spots. Keep going to the middle. Keep getting to that that slot area when we already have two guys down low. Like, don't go behind the net. Like, things like that. You just got to stay with it because he'll get those chances. He had some chances against the Rangers. He had a half a breakaway. He had two half of breakaways. Now he's got to play a little faster and separate himself. That's what he comes down to. You can't get frustrated and just keep working.
So you had a question and you had a follow-up. Now, Tocchet kind of putting this on the media, I think, is kind of rich, but okay, fine. Well, I guess I'll temporarily allow it. I don't think that it's a totally fair criticism, but okay, he can roll with that. What you're hearing is a coach who, once again, doesn't believe that the star player is doing enough of the right things to play a holistic game that is helpful to the team to win games, because Tocchet's focus is the team winning games. It's not about focusing specifically on how to maximize Matvei Michkov. He is just one guy. Tocchet wants him to play a game that benefits the entire team. Okay, he's a coach. It makes sense. I will just simply point out respectfully that the development of Rodrigo Abels doesn't matter, and that the playing of Nick Delorier doesn't mean fuck all, and that whether or not Bobby Brink becomes a 20-goal scorer instead of a 15-goal scorer really doesn't have a lot of bearing on whether or not this team is eventually going to be a cup contender. There are a lot of things that are worth focusing on. I would say that maximizing one of, if not the only player on the team who potentially has an elite skill set, maybe figuring out a way to maximize him is important, but I'm just a guy talking into a microphone. All right, we'll continue.
When you mentioned the switching with Barkey, is that, we talked about, I think it was in Buffalo, about his sometimes take maybe too short of a shift. Is it in relation to that, where he's coming up too?
So this is Jackie Spiegel. It's a fair question, and it's about the short shifts. And so notice they're talking about Barkey, right? Because Tocchet had just said that the argument was about, or the discussion on the bench was about whether or not Michkov was switching at the right time with Barkey, and that he needs to make the decisions that benefit the team. So Jackie's kind of run with this idea of Barkey. And so, all right, now watch. You can see that the body language and the facials are changing.
Too soon, or staying on too long, or?
Well, he comes off if he's, we tell our players when you're tired, get off. So if he's tired after 20 seconds, get off. I don't know. What do you want me to say? People, he's getting enough shifts. He's coming off short because sometimes he's tired.
So is that too candid? Is that fair? I don't know. Is he throwing his player under the bus saying, well, if he's tired after 20 seconds, he's tired after 20 seconds. Is that it? Because, that doesn't exactly sound great. But also, I don't know, there's part of me that says, is that an indictment on your staff that, if he's tired after 20 seconds and he's not exactly fleet of foot, does that mean that, nobody's getting through to him on from a conditioning standpoint? I would find that deeply concerning. All right, we'll continue.
I don't know what the big deal of that is. And
working with him today, it seems like he's willing to want to work on things. I think
this is question number 4 about
Michkov.
Michkov. I think this is question 4.
I've asked, we're 10 and what are we, 17 and 10. We got a good record. I've answered 6 Michkov questions. I mean, enough's enough, guys. I'm getting a little. We got Vladar having a great year. Drysdale playing really good 5-on-5 for us.
That's lovely. That is good that Drysdale's playing well.
We got a lot of other players playing good.
Vladar's having a great season.
So, this is the 5th question. I know you guys, I appreciate it, but you're trying to make something that's not. He's got to learn to play the game, and he's trying. And he's a lot better defensively.
Oh, there's a
He's a lot
compliment.
better playing a team game,
Mhm.
and that's how you win hockey. It's not about catering to one person. I hate to tell you guys. That's it.
There's a condescension in that phrasing that is where I have the actual issue. That is condescending. The people who are in that room, there are certainly some that I think do a much better job than others, but the people who are down there, for the most part, have a good enough understanding of the game and sports and the dynamics of the on ice or on court or on field versus off product, right? And so this notion out there that like this is somehow a media driven narrative and that the only people who seem to care about Matvei Michkov's shifts or about whether or not he's playing selflessly enough or if he's playing too selfishly or if he's in shape or out of shape, the idea that it's just a media driven narrative is nonsense. Is it driven in large part by the media and by the fans who are concerned that this player who they believed was going to take a big step in his second year, that he has done pretty much the opposite, that he has of late been more productive, but still doesn't look nearly like the guy he was a season ago? Fans are allowed to be concerned about that. And they're allowed to be concerned about that because, again, and I will repeat to the people who may not understand this, so I'll say it very slowly. The reason that people care that Matvei Michkov hasn't looked comfortable or taken another step is because in the minds of many, including some in that building who are very cognizant of how this thing is supposed to work if you're trying to build a Stanley Cup contender, he's one of the only players worth building around. He's one of the only players on your team that has value. Even if the Flyers were to make a determination that Matvei Michkov is not going to be the superstar they hoped he would be, the superstar that luckily fell to them in the draft because of geopolitical issues and him being under contract in the KHL when he was drafted, even if those people were ready to give up, even if they were ready to say, we don't think he's going to reach that superstar status, we're iffy on if he'll be a star, guess what? When it comes down to how do we make a trade for a number one center or a number one defenseman or get the assets in place that would allow us to get one of those guys, there are only two human beings right now that are part of the Flyers organization that are worth that. One is named Matvei Michkov, and the other is Porter Martone. You know who teams aren't exactly asking for right now? Do you think that when Vancouver was kind of canvassing the league for Quinn Hughes suitors, do you think that Vancouver said, we're very interested in Sean Couturier, we're very interested in Travis Konechny, we're very interested in Owen Tippett, we're very interested in Noah Cates? No. We're very interested in Jamie Drysdale, maybe as part of the trade. I'll give Drysdale that, like maybe. Cam York, maybe as part of the trade, but not as the centerpiece of the trade. So even if you were to look at this from a somewhat negative perspective that, he's not going to be a superstar, if you were going to try to move him, you would still get value for Matvei Michkov because he's one of the only people worth a damn in your organization. So if you're Rick Tocchet and you came to this team and you spent time as an analyst and then you were a coach in the Western Conference and you're evaluating your opportunities this past offseason. Do I stay in Vancouver where they want me? Do I go to the Flyers where they want me? Do I go to Pittsburgh, right? Pittsburgh was another one of those teams that were rumored to be interested in Tocchet. You're looking at the entirety of the roster. You're looking at where they're at in this so-called rebuild and what the path forward is to get to a Stanley Cup. Matvei Michkov, I would think, is probably one of the players that Rick Tocchet was like, yeah, I want to coach that guy. I want to figure it out. I want to get that guy to the next level. Well, it hasn't happened right now. It isn't happening so far this season. So this idea that like the media and the fans should just be like,
oh yes, we all trust that Rick Tocchet is doing exactly what needs to happen. We're not allowed to say anything.
That's nonsense. Nonsense. You're supposed to be able to be critical. That's the whole point. When you're media, you're supposed to evaluate things fairly. You're supposed to ask questions fairly. And each of the people who asked a question there, I think we had Kevin Kurz twice, we had Jackie Spiegel, and I think the last one was Jordan Hall. They were all fair questions. None of that was off base. None of that was off color. Nothing was even insinuating that like, oh, Rick, Matvei Michkov is a much better player under John Tortorella. Does that mean that you're not as good of a coach? There was none of that. So like, what's there to take exception to? Right? I had to answer 5 or 6 questions. That's your job. Sorry, man. Like that is your job. And you know that. No one's going to ask, like, no, sorry. Like Emil Andre, if he has a good game tonight, they're going to ask about Emil Andre. But like in a morning press conference, are they going to ask about Emil Andre? Probably not. if you got into what appeared to be a little bit of a dust up on the bench with Emil Andre against the Rangers, yeah, they probably ask about Emil Andre. Are they going to ask you about Dan Vladar right now? Will they ask if he's going to be in the lineup? Because there's a scary update that like, oh, Vladar might miss some time. Sounds like he's going to be back. So that's good. But they're not just like willy-nilly for fun after what happened on the bench the other day say, oh yeah, let's ask him about Dan Vladar to start the press conference. They're not going to look at it and say, oh, let's ask about how much Christian Dvorak was missed in the lineup against the Rangers. Like, no. And see, the thing is, I know Tocchet's a smart guy, and I know Tocchet is very cognizant of what is said about his team and what is written about his team. And so, to that end, he is not allowed to try to get away with this idea that it's a media-driven narrative and that, like, everyone is blowing it out of proportion. Is it being blown out of proportion a little bit? Depends on the outlet. It depends on the blogger. It depends on the person tweeting. It depends on the person talking into the mic. I'm not sounding every alarm and raising like 70 red flags about Matvei Michkov's play so far this year. I do think that he's taken a step back. I do hope that he's going to get better because for this team to reach any kind of ceiling it has, Michkov's going to have to be part of it. But at the same time, I will once again ask the same question that I asked last week over on Snow the Goalie. I asked this exact question to Riley Cote, to Bundy, to Ant. I simply said, hey, at some point, doesn't it come back to a coach that when you have a system, when you have a team that you take over, yes, you can be very rigid in your system, in your tactics, in your decision-making process. You can be rigid. However, if you have a player who doesn't totally fit within that system, are you going to try to force that player into that system at that player's detriment and potentially at the ceiling of that player or that player progressing? Are you going to do that to the detriment of that player for the greater good of the team, which is still a team that night in and night out isn't as good as the opposition a lot of times? Are you going to do that? Or do you maybe make an exception? Do you adapt your game plan a little bit to try to meet the strength? Matvei Michkov is not a north-south player. He is an east-west player. Tocchet likes to play a lot of north-south. He likes to talk about guys getting north. Well, that's not Michkov's game. He's talking about the fact that, maybe instead of going behind the net, Michkov needs to be in the slot. Don't go to the net front when there are two guys there. That's all fair. However, doing so would also kind of negate some of the success that Michkov had last season. Part of where Michkov was so successful last year was when he was causing havoc behind the net on the power play or at 5-on-5. So now if you're going to remove that entirely from his game, you are actively choosing to negate something that was useful and beneficial to him and the team last year. So you better have something to replace it with. And to this point, I'm all for a one-for-one swap. If you want to take away an element of Matvei Michkov's game and put something in place that you think is going to be even better and he can immediately transition to, like say he's not going to be behind the net, but he's going to be our only net front presence, whatever it is, whatever the decision of it. We're going to play him on the left, we're going to play him on the right. Here's why, analytics, blah, blah, blah. Fine. But he better find the success. He hasn't found it yet. So it's hard for me to go, yeah, they're doing due diligence. They're doing right by Matvei Michkov and by the long-term development of the player, which ultimately is going to be good for the long-term development of the Flyers as a Stanley Cup contender. To this point, I'm not there. I don't think that Tocchet has done enough to maximize Matvei Michkov. And I do think that a lot of responsibility falls on Michkov for not coming into the season in shape. But guess what? It's December. It's not mid-October. It's not the early part of November. It is time to buckle up, Buttercup. It's time to put up or to shut up. And I will note one other thing, because Tocchet, in the midst of this presser, said this thing where he's like, we're what, 17, 10, and 7, and I'm answering 6 questions or 5 questions about Matvei Michkov. Are the Flyers 17, 10, and 7? Yes. Will you say points percentage-wise, that's a 60.3 points percentage? Yes, sure. That is still 500. I live in the world where you either win the game or you lose the game. So the Flyers are a 500 team. They are 17 and 17 in my eyes because I'm insane. And I don't look at point percentage. I look at the record. You're a 500 team going into Christmas, which is great. Again, no expectations for this team. They're 500 going into Christmas almost. Like, awesome. Good job. Cool. They only have 10 regulation wins this year. 10. And if you're wondering, where does 10 regulation wins stack up against the rest of the Eastern Conference? I got news for you. The only team that has fewer than 10 regulation wins in the entire Eastern Conference is the Columbus Blue Jackets at 7. That is it. Columbus. That's all. The Flyers are winning a lot of shootout games. They've won overtime games, but I don't know if you've noticed recently, the Flyers are not an automatic win in the shootout anymore. They have not had the automatic win when Sam Ersson is in net in a shootout. They have not had the automatic first goal coming out of Trevor Zegras the last few shootouts. So, I'm sorry. I will look at this critically, and I will say that while the Flyers are probably better than many expected them to be, they only have 10 regular season wins. You had a lot of, you want to call it skill, a lot of luck that you were able to find the second point in overtime or the shootout. That's great. But eventually, you come back down to earth, and it feels like that's where the Flyers are. And so they are 3-3-4 in their last 10 games. It is not the end of the world, but let's also not make it sound like this team has somehow become a legitimate contender. They are certainly not there. So again, this notion that we're 17-10-7 and that should be enough to kind of get the media to like lay off. No, this is a market that Rick Tocchet understands. So you know that this is going to happen. This is a job that you chose to take. This is a roster that you chose to take over as the coach. This is the star player that many have put a lot of resources into within the organization. And certainly from the fan base perspective, they put a lot into cheering for this guy. It doesn't mean that you betray who you are as a coach. It doesn't mean that you betray everything that it is to be Rick Tocchet, the coach. However, I will simply point out that it is your job to maximize the players. And while I don't think you make a full sweeping exception and allow Matvei Michkov to get away with murder, right? Maybe there is a way to thread that needle a little bit better and get better productivity out of Michkov and accentuate the things that he does well and help to mask the things that he doesn't while he's learning how to mask those things himself. That is all. Maybe I'm crazy. Could be me. Now, I meant to go over to the comments, and there are a lot of them, and they've been going on the screen, and it looks like a lot of you have been going back and forth. But I got to go because even though it's a late game, as many of you are aware, I'm now past 4 o'clock, which means it's going to take me almost 2 hours to get to the Flyers game. If I leave at 3, I get there in 45 minutes. If I leave anytime after 4, it takes at least an hour and a half. And as we get closer and closer to 4:30, it's going to take me at least an hour and a half, which means I will get there in time for the 7 o'clock start of the Press Row Show tonight. Flyers take on the Canucks. We will continue this conversation if you have not done so already. First, with the Russ Joy Show, like the video, share the video, subscribe. You can also find the show in the podcast feed, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. You certainly can and should like and subscribe and maybe even ring the bell to get notified when this show goes live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And yeah, subscribe to the podcast, leave a 5-star rating on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. You can leave a 5-star review and I'll read it on the show. We are getting closer. We're not there yet. We're getting closer to 2,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel, which I find very fun. You can also find clips of this show on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube Shorts. So if you see those videos pop across your feed, give those a like as well. I will talk to all of you tonight. I'm sure that many of you who are going back and forth in the comments right now will join us tonight over on the Press Row Show for Flyers Canucks, 7 o'clock start, 7:30 puck drop. I will be back at some point with a show this week. Now, I am very cognizant of the fact that Wednesday is Christmas Eve and Thursday is Christmas. And so I don't know when the next show will be. We might take off the middle of the week and we'll come back on Friday. I'm not sure which day, but there will be another show, at least one this week. So I will talk to all of you tonight on the Press Row Show. I'll talk to you Tuesday night at Chickies and Pete's in Bordentown, where we'll do Snow the Goalie Radio. Come on out, talk some puck. Let's do some fun stuff for the holidays. And then I'll be back later this week on the Russ Joy Show. Until later this week, this has been the Russ Joy Show, and I've been Russ Joy, but you knew that already because you're smart, and it's also the name of the show. Talk to each and every one of you very, very soon here on the Russ Joy Show.